What's up and welcome to the No One Is Watching podcast, where we explore high-performing teams and individuals, dig deep to find out what makes them tick. Whether it's in sports, business, the military, or everyday life, this show highlights the DNA shared by elite performers, the process through which they leverage that talent, and ultimately, it helps you apply those lessons to your own life, business, or team. Yeah, man. So every time I check in on you on social media, you're like all over the place and super busy. So what's been keeping you busy lately?
I stay busy. Well, besides family, it's my second profession now that I've retired from 30 years of the U.S. Army. I'm currently working for Team Red, White, and Blue, or Team RWB. It's a veteran nonprofit that focuses on building the nation's leading health and wellness community for veterans. We're going into our 15th year. It's an organization that's been around for a while that started out using physical fitness and kind of health and wellness to connect veterans to their community. So getting people out together, doing, 5Ks, hiking, walking, working out, but using kind of physical activity to kind of build that bond within your community post service. And it's evolved over the years now to really kind of lean into using kind of that holistic health and fitness and wellness model to kind of stay well ahead of, any kind of chronic health issues, but again, built on that idea of a local community. So,
yeah, I imagine that's something that is probably lacking coming out of the military, right? You have to be physically fit, right? To stay in there. And then you're just obviously surrounded by community constantly. So is that a big part of the driver, was just sort of trying to, I don't want to say replace it, but fill a little bit of that void?
No, absolutely. That's exactly what our founder, Mike Irwin, kind of tied into, was this idea that you get that loss of not only purpose that the military kind of provides you on a day in and day out in terms of like, this is my mission, this is the thing I'm working towards, but also that team kind of camaraderie that it's built around you, for the purpose of doing the nation's business when it comes to being in the service. But when you get out, you lose that, right? You lose not only kind of the idea of you had somebody on the left and right, but also like what's driving you daily to kind of stay accountable to yourself and what keeps you motivated. I think a lot of guys, like me, don't have to shave, so I'm growing a beard. Same thing happens with, well, I don't have to get up every morning and do push-ups and sit-ups and do a 2-mile run, so why am I going to do that? And the challenge is you do that for too long and it becomes the norm, and then it gets really hard to get off the couch, right? So ideally, we're trying to stay ahead of that, with veterans and meet them where they're at, but, and provide them with an opportunity to continue to get after it with other members of their community. Because we're open to everybody, not just veterans, but active duty,
cool.
And 20% of our population is civilians that are members. A lot of our family members, but just some are just folks that want to hang out with veterans and, go for a run. Yeah.
That's great. How many, I'm curious, like what the distribution is between guys that, or I shouldn't say guys, veterans that seek it out, that that's a priority for them. It's a big part of their life, staying fit and wellness, versus the ones that maybe let it slide a little bit, like you touched on, and maybe you're reaching out to them, or they're like, man, I need some help to kind of get back on track.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix. I think we find a lot of our newer members are those people that are looking for something to kind of jumpstart them, get them going again, because they've maybe taken a little bit too much time off. A lot of folks that are motivated coming out of the service to continue to work out and do the things they need to do for their physical health and wellness. Maybe they don't see themselves needing a team Red, White, and Blue. But we get a lot of those folks too, because they see it as an opportunity to fulfill that purpose side of, well, I can help all these guys and gals that aren't getting off the couch and get them back out. So it's a mix of both. I don't know if it's an even distribution. I think this time of year, we get a lot of people that are just trying to get off the couch, right? Start their New Year's resolutions.
Right.
Yeah, it's good.
That's good. That's good. I mean, I think that's what makes, whether it's CrossFit or any of these other sort of, schools of fitness, if you want to call them that, right? Successful is that it's that community, it's that tribe. You can go get a good workout doing a million different things, right? But being a part of something, having that accountability partner, so to speak, and that environment, it's hugely powerful, right?
Yeah, there's a power behind that additional level of accountability beyond yourself that helps out, as well as just the idea that you're going through it together, right? Again, that other piece of being in the military of, we like to say you all embrace the suck together, to get through it. So you have that, outside of it with our community. And we're really effective at doing both kind of in person. And we've built out our own application that allows people to do it virtually as well. So again, we're distributed in nature. We're fully remote organization that has like chapters in almost every state, over 200,000 plus members. But it's, we're trying to like expand our reach to also allow like that virtual community to be built as well. So it's a great place as well where you can check in daily real quick. It's not like social media where you're doom scrolling, but you get to see some motivation, get to see some things people are doing. There's activity groups for anything you'd want to be active in, whether it's running, rucking, CrossFit, functional fitness. So it really provides everybody kind of access to trying to get their journey going.
Yeah. And before we forget, where can people access that? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find us at teamredwhiteandblue.org on the web. Just Google Team Red, White, and Blue or Team RWB, and also in the app stores, both the Google and Apple App Store. You can find our app. But it's a pretty simple process. It's free to join for anybody. If you're a veteran, you get a free red T-shirt, so you can rock the eagle, as we call it, and get out there and start getting after it.
That's awesome, man. I see you out there. You're billboarding left and right with the eagle, so you're doing a good job representing the organization. Maybe I'm wrong, but I imagine that there's a sort of an organic element specifically for the veterans, right? Where that shared experience, setting aside sort of the physical and the wellness piece, right? Just the bond and the shared experience of it's not like you're going to therapy or sitting down for a group counseling session, right? You're going out, which in and of itself, exercise, right, is great for your brain, your mind, your overall wellness. But I imagine there has to be some sort of organic benefit of the non-physical that you all experience or provide.
Yeah, I mean, it's just having that community around you again. Once you're out of the services, I think it's critical. I think it's critical for everybody, not just veterans. I think it's a unique crucible when you serve in terms of like how they introduce you to the military. No matter if you're enlisted or officer, you go through some sort of crucible to kind of understand what it's all about, and then despite all the good times, you suffer through some bad ones, and knowing you have people to your left and right is critical, right? So whether it's showing up for the 5K, it's that first 5 minutes in the parking lot when everyone's like, Sully, how's it been? What have you been up to? That's just as much part of the medicine as the run is itself,
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. So tell me a little bit about your journey, right? Like, so the military was kind of the family business for you, right?
Well, yeah, it kind of was in terms of everyone all the way back to my great grandfather served in some capacity. It wasn't the only thing they did. I think I was the only guy, like if you go, it was a career military guy.
Okay.
But yeah, going back to my mom's grandfather, my great grandfather served in World War I. It's interesting. He has an interesting story. He was born in Montana, and back then, turn of the century, you didn't have to go to college first before you went to medical school. So straight out of like high school, he took like his medical boards, went to medical school, graduated, and planned on joining the Army and serving in World War I as like a surgeon. Due to an injury to his finger when he was a kid, which wasn't significant, they're like, sorry, you can't serve as an officer, as a surgeon, but you can go over as a medic, and serve.
Okay.
So he enlisted and deployed to Europe, ran into one of his college professors in a hospital. He's like, what are you doing here as an enlisted guy? He tells him the whole story. The guy goes, we'll take care of this. He gets a battlefield commission to captain, and they make him a surgeon in the hospital. So he finished out his World War I time as a surgeon.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I came back, got out of the military, and served as a doctor in Montana, in Butte, Montana, but until he passed. Then I have 3 grandfathers because my dad's biological father died in World War II. So his adopted father also served in World War II. So
Man.
I had 2 on his side, and then my mom's dad served in the Navy in World War II. And then my dad served in Vietnam as an infantry platoon leader and an infantry officer. And then he got out and was a lawyer for the rest of his life. And then it's me. And then, I have 3 children, but the younger 2, the twins, are both captains now in the U.S. Army. Both went to West Point. Samantha's an engineer. Jackson's an infantry officer. Samantha does something a little bit different, though, because she's in the Army's world-class athlete program. So she plays on the U.S. Army women's rugby team. So,
yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that. That was a ton of fun to watch.
Well, 2024 was a big year for her and the family. So she started playing rugby in college. She was a soccer player her entire life. Thought she might be able to walk on when she got to West Point. And when they got through their summer training, the women's soccer coach was like, I'm not taking any walk-ons. The team is full. So her alternate plan was to try out for the women's rugby team who takes crossover athletes, because it's just not as a big, with feeder schools as, for other
Sure.
sports. So the rest is kind of history. She by her third game of Finns rugby in the fall, she got in due to a couple of the women getting injured. And then by the fifth game, she was starting. She finished out her 15-7 career at West Point as the all-time leading scorer for women's rugby at West Point. Her junior year, she won what they call the Prusmack Award, which is kind of like the Heisman Trophy. Well, it is like the Heisman Trophy for rugby. So she won that. They didn't do it the senior year, I think probably because of COVID, because the seventh season was canceled. But so coming out of West Point, she went straight to become an engineer officer, went to Colorado, continued to play rugby on her own with a women's semi-pro team in Denver while she was in Colorado Springs. And the USA rugby team she had been talking to since college in terms of camps and other things. And they brought her on right before the World Cup in 22, and the rest was kind of whirlwind. They qualified in 23, then went to Paris. We were all there, and we got to watch the last second score from Spiff Cedric against Australia, which was a team we hadn't beat in a year and a half. So it was insane. It was insane to win that bronze medal. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. It was presumably got all her athletic ability from mom, but I'm not. No, it was a ton of fun to see, man. I mean, like the you touched on it, the feeder program and that lack of pipeline, right? Like that's one of those sports where, obviously there's a lot of tie-ins to other sports, whether it's soccer, football, lacrosse, whatever it may be, right? But it's just for watching it from a distance, right? I don't know a ton about rugby, but just seeing it, you're like, man, it's a little bit like hockey. Like these guys are a little different, like they're just built a little different.
Yeah. She heard about rugby from me. I played rugby in college because, again, I played Division III college football. And in the spring was the 15s season, and I had a friend who played soccer in the fall as well. He's like, hey, you and one of the other players, one of our good friends, he's like, you guys should try out rugby. This was my junior year of college. So my junior and senior year, I became a pretty good rugby player, at least in our program. And I love the sport. It's great because it is, if you grow up in the U.S. playing basketball, soccer, football, hockey, so team sports on large fields, and you start to understand the dynamics of like zone and man defenses and the flow of the game, you can pick up basically the strategy of rugby pretty quick as an American. Passing is a little bit more difficult. Like the way you pass the ball backwards in the lateral is not like lateral in a football at all, unless you're really close. So you got to pick up some of those nuances a little bit more. But I loved it. And I told Samantha all her life about, my glory days of, rugby at, Claremont McKenna College. And she was very much a very aggressive soccer player. And she often, was upset that there wasn't like women's American football or, contact sports for women growing up. So the opportunity to do that at West Point, she went after it, and she found her calling in life that she's definitely.
Talk about crucible, right? Like you're going to do it for the first time and you're going to do it at West Point. I mean, that's jumping into the frying pan, man. That's great. Yeah. Not surprising, just from what I saw on TV in rugby, that she was an aggressive soccer player.
Yeah, she was always everywhere. She could always see the field very well, but she relied a lot on pure aggression and speed to get things done. Yeah,
that'll get you pretty far in some places. So that's awesome. So you went Claremont McKenna. You played college football, you said, right? So was it always in the cards for you? Always plan on serving after college?
No, I actually sophomore year had no idea. I was like a government history major. I'm like, maybe I'm going to go to law school. I think that's what I thought I would do because my dad went to law school. I had an older sister go to law school. And I got a letter from the ROTC department saying that they had a 2-year scholarship for the junior and senior year. You had to go to basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky to get caught up to speed with the 2 years you missed. So like not talking to my parents or anything, I just signed up for it because I had heard all these stories and my dad's service and my grandfather's service. And I was like, and I had looked at the academies, but at that point I was like, well, maybe this is an opportunity. I'll try this for a while. I'll get 2 years of school paid for. I'll do my 4 years of service and then, then I'll go to law school. Well,
Yep. Yeah.
yeah. 30 years later, I still have not gone to law school.
It's never too late. It's never too late.
It's true. That's true. That's what my dad would tell me.
That's funny, man. Just kind of, you just assume, right? Your lineage and everything, that it was kind of always part of the plan, but sometimes the best laid plans, right?
Yeah.
So you did 30 years in the military. Is that right?
I did. Yep.
30 years.
30 years in the Army.
Retired as a colonel.
I did. Retired as a
time.
full bird colonel. Most of that time here at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And started out as a field artillery officer. But the way it works is once you hit captain, about 4 years in, you can try out to be a special forces officer if that's what you think you want to do. I had a special forces NCO in my ROTC department when I was at Claremont, and that was always in the back of my head. And my wife was super supportive when I said, hey, I'd really like to do this. She goes, well, I guess if you're ever going to if anything, this is pre 9/11. She's like, if anything ever happens, it would be best if you're with the best of the best. And, so if we're going to stay in the Army, why don't you, go for it if that's what you want to do. So, with her support, went to selection, and it would be 2000. And then I was in school. I had made it through the qualification course and was picking up my books for French, because every special forces officer gets a second language. On 9/11 was when I was picking up my books. So still made it through. They had us go through language school. Showed up at 3rd Special Forces Group, and 3 weeks later, I was in Afghanistan for my first of 6 deployments to Afghanistan. I never deployed to Iraq.
Imagine you probably didn't get a whole lot of use out of that French.
No, not at all. Well, there's been a few times I've tried. There was my second trip. There was a French Special Forces team that came to our fire base, and they needed some fuel. And I was then a captain. The major I worked for was with me at my base. He was fluent in French and knew my French sucked. So I told this guy at the front gate, we were trying to speak to him in French, and finally he's like, I speak English better than your French, so let's just go with English. I was like, perfect.
Can I talk to your supervisor, please? I need somebody.
Well, what I told him is, I was like, I'll give you whatever you need in terms of fuel and whatever for his, for their trucks. I go, you just got to tell my boss that we did this all in French and that my French is phenomenal. He goes, no problem. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So I used it a little bit there. And then later in my career, I spent a year in Lebanon, and the Lebanese have spoken French and English as a second language. So I used it a little bit there. I'm pretty good at understanding when people are speaking. It's when I have to converse. And then the same in Africa. I was a brigade commander for a conventional unit that sent small teams across the African continent. And besides English, as a second primary language, French is the other language. So in some of the places like Senegal and the like, I was able to at least understand the conversation and stay in it, but
not along.
No.
Yeah. So you got thrown right into it. 9/11. Obviously there's been, Fort Bragg specifically in the news lately, right? With some of the recent events, the recent tragedies that have been going on. I mean, talk about, the community and veterans and everything else. I mean, that's probably, I guess, 2 very distinct situations, but ones that involved, veterans that spent time at, you're in your backyard for a long time. I mean, I had to hit home.
I did, definitely, especially with the 10th Group guy. I mean, being another Special Forces, service member, it's just one of those things you're like, hey, how could this happen? Being around long enough, though, it's no secret that veterans and in the military, there's a higher than normal suicide rate. There's mental health challenges like everybody has. It just comes down to, you really got to stay ahead of it. And the sad thing for the veteran community and the military in general is that, 2 tragic situations and 2 individuals that did something that really brought a light upon themselves. Unfortunately, people think that somehow their military service is probably a contributing factor, when in fact it was probably the thing that was keeping them on the straight and narrow more than anything. And when you look at the other 18 million veterans that are in the United States doing amazing things on a daily basis, it's hard because it's not just what happened recently. It's something I've seen as an active duty member and then somebody now in this space working in the veteran service organization, is that I think a lot of organizations fed into that victimization narrative that, all veterans are broken, ill, and injured, and they always will be, and so it created an environment that created a lot of help for veterans that they needed, that especially those that are really in those issues, whether it's chronic physical or mental health issues that need to be addressed, right? And we have incredible programs now and people that support that, and it needs to stay that way. But again, the other, majority of the group is doing great things on a daily basis. And, we really try to push that narrative at RWB that, your greatest days are ahead of you. You got to take ownership of that. And, veterans are here to provide, a great resource, quite frankly, for the United States. They always have been, post-service. So, but it's challenging times, and it's something that you gotta address and continue to work through, right?
Well, it's like anything. I mean, you're gonna hear about the plane crash. You're not gonna hear about the thousands of flights that went off without a hitch, and that's the world we live in, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. But I mean, honestly, I saw something on the news the other day that made me sick, and it was, I don't even know who it was, what channel it was, whatever. But it was some guy who was politicizing it and trying to draw parallels between immigration and whatever it was, and it was like, there's a bigger threat in the U.S. military with veterans than there is with, and I'm just like, I almost threw up. I mean, it was like, man, for someone to sort of besmirch anybody who has served in that way. I mean, I have not served, right? But it made me so angry just to hear it. And he's probably doing it for clickbait, and he wants to get the attention too. But like 90% of people you encounter, like, they have so much respect for the military, and rightly so. And, what you guys do, there's just that relatability that, that people who have not served can't offer. They can empathize, they can thank you for service, and they can do all these things that, don't ring hollow. I mean, I remember having a conversation with a veteran once, and he was like, man, just don't ever thank a veteran for his service. And I'm like, I just never really, he goes, it's just it comes across as trite, and you don't know what we've been through. And I'm like, well, I know, but that's why I kind of want to thank you for the sacrifices, right? Because I didn't. And so it's just such a personal thing, that if you haven't been in those shoes, you can't understand what's going on, good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, it's the amazing thing about our nation and our military, as strong as it is, that, we're able to have an all volunteer force that, is made up of only 1% of the population, and allows the other, 99% to do amazing things on their own, right? To make, that's the reason why we're the greatest nation in the world and in history, and in my opinion, so I don't mind people thanking me for my service. I had a friend that, I didn't come up with this, but, he always made a point of thanking them for their support immediately. He never say you're welcome, because that's not what it's about. So it's, again, well, thank you for the support is critical, because without it, we can't continue to do what we do and feel like we're doing it for the right reasons, for those people that really understand, what the sacrifice service, what it comes with. So yeah, it's a challenging time. It's a challenging time, I think in general, where as Americans, we got to step back and kind of, like, especially for us at Team RWB, when you talking about community, it's critical with all the interconnective, like, things that we have, social media, podcasts, all this stuff that we're doing. We just continue to isolate ourselves more and more, not just veterans, but everybody, right? And then we start listening to things that are kind of within our own echo chamber. And a lot of times that can lead us to some really bad decisions, right?
Yep.
So again, as hard as it is, we got to take it upon ourselves to make sure that we're reaching out to those people that we know are in our lives, especially those we know that are having, like, personal challenges that, they're going to need that help, so that's where I go when this kind of stuff happens, is to step back and ask my question, like, okay, am I doing my part to make sure that, this doesn't happen again? And, like, how do we stay ahead of it? Because it's all our responsibilities, so rather than casting blame.
I mean, the preventative, your point about preventative measures, right? That's, an ounce of prevention. Once people go to that place, there's no telling, you may not be able to pull them back, but sometimes just knowing, hey, I can't do anything to help, but I'm sorry you're going through this, right? Just the whole, it sounds cliche, right? But, like, you're not in this alone kind of deal. It's real. I mean, one of my favorite books is Tribe by Sebastian Junger, right? And just the simple way he explains just the world we live in now, right? We get in our cars and we drive to wherever we go, and then we come back and we close the door, our garage door goes down, we go in our little fortress, right? And I was like, man, I've never thought about it that way. And you used to live as part of a tribe, and everything was shared resources and communal, and we've gotten away from that. And I mean, we're still seeing the effects of COVID and the isolation. And that kind of, I thought was kind of the impetus for me doing a podcast, was like, I started during COVID, just doing writing, just almost for therapeutic reasons, right? And just putting it out in the world. And I didn't have a social media presence. So I was just kind of,
Yeah.
shouting into the void. And I said, man, I could be Bill Shakespeare. It's still just my voice, like writing. It's just still, it's a narrative that whether I mean to or not, it's a monologue, right? And I always learn more from dialogue, and you can just share conversations with people who've done amazing things that have gone through unique, experiences. And so, I couldn't agree more as far as the whole, kind of forcing yourself out there, whether it's virtually or in person.
No, yeah, I mean, you absolutely, and it is a forcing function, right? Because again, we've created this environment where it's so much more comfortable not to do that.
It's so easy to never when you have to get on the phone with a human being now, you're like, okay, fine. It's not an automated whatever, or it's not touchscreen or.
Yeah, it's funny how that's switched, right?
Yeah.
10 years ago, if you got the automated voice, you're like, can I just talk to a person?
I know.
And you're like, wait, is this a person I'm talking to?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a guy. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you and I crossed paths when you were still, you were still in the military, you were still serving, but you were, you were planning for the future, right? You were trying to figure out what came next. And, we were talking about sort of the parallels between military and sports. And I have a lot of experience in one area and none in the other, but I can see the story I always tell is that there are a few different like profiles that can walk into a major league clubhouse, and people being the players, right? They turn and look, they pay attention, right? And one's a little bit more, I guess, authentic than the other, but one is, sort of the rock star, movie star, celebrity, profile.
Yeah.
And then it's the military. Yeah. And, it's one is a little bit more superficial, right? But I was always cool for me because I would stand back and watch, and like, it really was a genuine, to your point earlier about appreciation for what they did. And they realized, look, I'm getting paid to play a kid's game and I make a ton of money and I'm so privileged. And here's some 19-year-old kid out there risking it all for all of us, So that was always like, it just offered a really good dose of perspective for me that, even the folks that don't have to spend their days worrying about that because they can go solve whatever they want with their privilege and their money, they still appreciate that. What was it about? Because I know you were curious about maybe exploring something in the sports world. What was it about it that intrigued you?
Well, I mean, we kind of touched on it already in terms of I've always been surrounded by team sports. Like growing up, I'm the youngest of 4 children, and my dad was our basketball coach for like all 4 of us. So I grew up in a gymnasium, grew up watching my brother play football, my sisters play track, softball, whatever, they were, basketball, definitely. So we were definitely a sport family, very competitive oriented, but also like really tight knit. So I was very fortunate in that aspect. And then I continued on through high school and got to play, small college sports, but it continued. And I found when I got into the military that I still had that environment of like the teammate mentality, that you could really rely on those people to your left and right. If you didn't show up on a daily basis, you were letting them down, so you had a responsibility there to your teammates. And that really kind of drove me forward throughout my, military career, especially when I got into special operations, because it's built on a team concept, special forces teams are 12 people. Everybody has their role, but if it doesn't come together, then things are not going to go well. And your responsibilities differ, but you're all part of that team. So,
what was the dynamic there real quick? I want to ask you on the special forces, is there a difference in the dynamic from an accountability or maybe a self-regulating perspective? Because it's a smaller group in the special forces versus the general military population. I mean, is there a shift there as far as when you joined that you saw like, are your teammates holding you more accountable, or was it that was always part of the?
Yeah, I mean, your teammates are definitely holding you more accountable. I mean, well, because again, it's this expectation that if there's so much more riding on it, because you don't have a larger number of people that if one person does do their job, 3 can step up and do it, right? So
yeah, right.
You only got 12 people on a special forces detachment, and even then it gets smaller because it's designed where at the top you have the captain who's the team leader. You have a team sergeant who's the most experienced non-commissioned officer on the team. He's a master sergeant in the Army and has done the majority. He's done one of the jobs on the team. He's done the second highest, which is the intel sergeant. and he's been around the longest with the most experience, right? You have a warrant officer who's grown up on the team, who then is commissioned as a warrant officer to be that deputy team leader. And then you have an intelligence officer who kind of like understands, this is what the enemy's doing, this is what our mission is going to be, kind of works that part of it when you start to do planning. So those 4 are at the top. And then what you have is 4 what we call military occupation skills. Underneath, you got a weapons sergeant who's your tactician, as well as he knows every weapon in the world and how to use it. You have a communication sergeant that understands the computers and the radios and all that stuff, keeps you talking, which is critical because it's only the 12 of you when you're out there alone and unafraid. So he keeps you so you're not totally alone. You got your medic who's essentially like a combat surgeon. He can on the field do things that a normal medic's not. He's not just putting a Band-Aid on you. He's cutting on you and making things stop bleeding and keep you alive until they can get you back to care, as well as understands, like if you're in a environment where you're in a nation that has other issues, he's giving out vaccines, he's helping the local people with their issues. He can be a dentist if he needs to. So there's 2 of those guys, and then you got 2 engineers who are your guys who help build things when you need stuff built, but ideally their job is to understand how to blow things up and do demolitions. So you have a senior and a junior of each one of those people on the team, right? So the team's designed that way, so you're constantly kind of learning from that senior individual all the way up to the team sergeant, who kind of owns the understanding of how the whole team's supposed to work together. And then you come into that as this brand new captain who came from a different, maybe if you were infantry or something like that, you might have some experience, or maybe you were a Ranger regiment guy. I was not. I was a field artillery officer. So again, my experience was just what I got in different officer training in terms of how small teams work together. And it's the responsibility of like the mission happening or not happening. I kind of equate it almost to like a coach, kind of, for that team leader. If the team fails, it's on the team leader. If they succeed, it's on the team. But the accountability for me on a daily basis was, exponentially. Like I had to like figure things out. But the team also knew that, hey, he's a generalist. His job is to more understand the tactician piece of how we're going to put this together, how he sees the larger kind of our team's role in, the higher echelons fight. And then, working with the team sergeant, he'll keep the captain out of trouble so we can all do our jobs. It's tough. It's a tough environment, especially for an officer. I always used to, when I became a company commander and then a battalion commander, I used to tell my captains, hey, you got 2 choices to make. You got 1 choice to make. You can be a team leader or you can be a team mascot. Your team will probably be successful either way because they're not going to want to fail. It's a bunch of Green Berets who are not going to want to fail. Your team's going to be really successful if you decide to be a team leader, which is hard because it's like a family environment. Like you go to barbecues together, everybody's family. It's so small and tight knit. It's very easy to slip into, I'm just one of the guys. Whereas a team leader occasionally is going to have to step up and say, hey guys, we're not going to do that. That's stupid. Or there's a better way of us like doing this. And maybe it's not exactly what you guys want to do, but trust me that I'm doing the right thing for the team. The mascot can't do that. He just wants to be on the team. So it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. And throughout your career in special operations, you're always just moving up to a larger team with people with even more experience, more eyes on you, and that accountability never goes away.
So accountability and probably humbling, I would imagine, right? Like there's got to be the guys that think that they've conquered everything, and then they graduate up, and it's like, oh, whoa, wait a second, there's more guys like this.
Yeah, the minute you think you have it all figured out and you have all the answers, someone's gonna explain to you don't. And professionally, it can come back to bite you, and so. And I think we all had our time. I mean, there was a couple of times where, I thought there's nobody that knows more about what I'm doing than me. And then I realized like, okay, you need to step back. There's a whole bunch of people out there that know more. So,
yeah.
But I had an incredible career and I have like no complaints based on how it all ended. But again, for me, it was like, where am I going to find that kind of environment or something similar to it where I can provide, use the experience that I built for 30 years, as well as, surround myself with folks that are motivated, that want to like improve themselves and a team of people around them. So I was gravitating at that time towards like, is there a place for me, like maybe in professional athletics, whether it was consulting or otherwise. I had always been a member of Team RWB since the start when my friend and the founder, Mike Irwin, started it. And when he reached out and said, I think what you're looking for is right here. It's right here in front of you, I came to realize that that's probably exactly what I'm looking for, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but I
it's
was very interested in professional sports. I mean, I think there's something there in terms of those people, because they're, seen as entertainers, don't get the credit, for the sacrifices that they're doing, for our, so we can sit around on a Saturday and a Sunday and scream at the TV,
yeah.
or during the week, at a baseball game and be like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, no, there's a lot that goes into it, and those guys do sacrifices, and obviously on a very different level than what you all do and did. But yeah, I always, there seems to be two things that come up a lot in subject matter conversations. If you talk to someone that's doing motivational speaking or leadership development or high performance sort of evaluations, and it's the military and it's sports, right? And they're relatable, they're linear, it's win or lose, live or die. That just resonates with folks, right? Whether you're an athlete or not, it's very easy to understand. This is what I have to do to win, at least in the abstract, right? And then whether it's the special forces or Major League Baseball, like really understanding sort of how that sausage is made, and you think, okay, I gotta stay healthy, I gotta work hard, I've gotta improve this one skill. There's a lot more under the hood that goes into it. And to your point, like that self-regulating environment, like those are the teams that win championships. Those are the things that do special things in the military. I'm sure the ones that, to your point about being successful with a mascot or a leader, right? Like, because they're gonna run it themselves. They're gonna hold each other accountable because they have to. Their survival or their success hinges on their teammates, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was obviously on a very different, on a different level, but I played through college. I played baseball. I grew up playing multiple sports, played baseball in college. But then I remember having this probably like every college or every athlete. I don't even say college. I mean, I'm sure it happens to guys in high school too, but like this existential crisis of this is over. And now what do I do? Right. And so I was just super lazy. And I just said, well, I'm going to work in sports. Right. Because it was either that or the military. Those are like the only two things I could think of that could possibly replace that environment. And it's just, I think guys that are transitioning out of both for different reasons, if they can't find that, it can present real problems, because you're talking about people that have been in that environment for 20, 30, 30 years of like their whole life, their whole adult life, certainly.
No, absolutely. Yeah. 100% agree that, yeah, I mean, so being aware of that, was what drove me to try to find something similar, right? Like what am I going to do? Something that's going to give me purpose on a daily basis, but also I'm surrounded with a whole bunch of folks that are, want to row in that same direction. So
yeah. So how is that? Obviously the team environment is pretty linear. I would imagine a pretty easy transition for you given the history you have with the organization, but how is it translated into the business world? I mean, you're got to fundraise, you've got to community build, you've got to do all these things that are, I don't want to say completely specialized, but you didn't have to tackle that, in your previous life.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm a person that draws on my, experiences. So, I try to find things that have already, that I had. So it is the unique thing about where I found myself as an officer and a special operator. I mean, there's oftentimes you got to sell yourself, your mission, what you think your capabilities are, whether, it's to a battalion commander when you're a young captain, you think you have the best idea for an operation in Afghanistan, to, working alongside U.S. ambassadors on the African continent, trying to convince them, hey, my, 5-person team I can send here to help with logistics in this country is going to help you. And this is why, So in terms of like sales, it's always kind of been there in terms of the requirements, in terms of what I found myself doing. And I don't know. I think some of the challenges, you're learning the new lingo, definitely in the nonprofit space, it's not, you're really trying to kind of sell the movement and like what you're trying to accomplish and why that return on investment would be important to the contributor, whether it's a member or a donor. Right. Yeah. So, it's a challenge daily because you want to stay genuine to the mission and what you're trying to do for your members without becoming disingenuous, in terms of like what you can accomplish or can't accomplish, with a 5K run once a week, type of thing. So,
well, I'm sure it comes across as authentic, right? Because that's where, I mean, you believe in the mission. It becomes, I'm the kind, I think a lot of people are like this, but like if I'm in the market for a blue shirt and you walk up to me and I can sense you're trying to sell me a blue shirt, I'm not gonna want the blue shirt anymore. I just don't want to be sold anything. But if it happens and you're like, hey man, I like your shirt, where'd you get that?
Yeah.
It's like, especially with the mission of the organization and the members of it, right? It's like I'll say it's an easy sell, but it's not like you're not trying to force it.
No, you can't. And again, what you really want is their contribution, right from the start. I mean, we were my wife and I were at a church event last night, and there was somebody from out of town, and he was 8 years in the Marine Corps. He works, for the U.S. Army now as a civilian. And my wife was talking to him and his wife, and she's like, "Oh, you should go talk to my husband. He runs a veterans organization." And he's like, "Well, what's it about?" She goes, "Oh, just ask him. He'll tell you." But he came over, he started explaining, he asked me about my history in the Army and just retiring after 30 years, and told me about his time in the Marine Corps. And he's like, "Well, tell me about this thing." And I gave him, not really the sales pitch. I was like, "Well, this is what it is, and this is how you can be a member." And like for me, I was like, "Hey, get in there and tell me what we're doing right and what we're not doing right."
Yeah.
Like become what I want you is to become a member, and then to figure out how to make this thing better for the guys that are, to your left and right. He lives in Wilmington. I was like,
Okay.
There's a chapter down there. I go, but it'd be better if you were in it. So let's find out what you can do. And I think that excited him in terms of the understanding of like, oh, I get to be a part of this thing. It's not just something that's there for me, and because there is, you got to get some skin in the game, right? You got to get people, feeling that they're accountable, not only to themselves, but like to what the thing is. And I think that's one of the greatest things about like Team RWB and what we're doing is, and we're willing to like see the gaps too, right? Because when we say health and wellness, I was like, that's a little scary. When I first came, I was like, it's a lot goes into that. And we're just doing like physical fitness.
Yeah.
It does have like other benefits. We talked about that in terms of the mental benefits. If I need to clear my mind, I'll go for a 5-mile run, and I feel great afterwards. But there are times when you get beyond the 5-mile run, providing you what you need. So we're working hard to find partners and people that do that specifically. So again, we can link up people within our community to those other folks that are out there that can help them, and then we'll be there for them when they get back, to keep that accountability going. Yeah. So it's a fun place to work actually on a daily basis, trying to kind of figure out these problems and how we're going to address it.
That's great. That's great. I don't want to keep drawing parallels between the military and sports, but it's the analogy I think of in my head is sort of the process of building, sort of rebuilding a team, tearing it down and building it, going through some pain to build it back and be competitive, which I've been a part of, versus, winning championships consistently or competing for championships consistently. And I think of that from a leadership perspective, there's got to be a difference between leading in peacetime versus leading in conflict, and so you talked a little bit about the special forces and the challenge of sort of straddling that line between being a leader and being one of the boys kind of thing. Can you tell me a little bit about how you approach that in those two scenarios?
Well,
or any observations you may have about it.
It's difficult, right? Like this is the funny thing. Like most people, I think maybe in sports, it's a little bit more relatable, but other organizations and people just in general, when you start talking about conflict or war, not to be disingenuous, it's a lot of us would be like, well, that's the easy part. Like at that point, you're doing your job. For the most part, 99.9% of everybody is focused on what they're supposed to be doing because they understand like what's the consequences or not, right? Mistakes. Yeah. And, when you're deployed and you have that kind of focus and attention, there's going to be problems. There's going to be mistakes made. But for the most part, keeping everybody accountable for what they need to do on a daily basis is much different than in the environment like we find ourselves in right now, where you're like in preparation mode and you don't know what's going to happen next. And it's a lot more difficult to keep people's focus and not to lose focus from the fact that there's other things that are probably more important than staying late at work when there isn't that kind of stuff going on, because this is the time you're with your families and there's things that you need to take care of and continue to work on. So if the balloon goes up, you can go back to that focus of, getting to where you need to be. But for me, again, it was understanding that ultimately, as the officer, I was accountable for what was going on, and trying to stay above the fray as much as possible. I wasn't always perfect at it. The guys who knew me as a captain would be like, "There's sometimes you were the mascot." But I think you have to learn, from those mistakes, even though at the time you don't think they're a mistake, you're just thinking, man, this is good. This is what a good leader would do with the guys. But at the same time, it's a challenge, like, to keep that focus moving forward. I think it's a little bit easier also in special operations because we do constantly deploy, especially with special forces, because you're going to train other armies in other parts of the world. So, the way it works, there's 5 active duty groups, and we've split up the world into these different regions. So that's why you learn a language. So originally, when I was supposed to be going to Africa and training the African militaries, they're high-end infantry, like special operations units, to do what we do, so we don't have to come do it for them, right, is the way I explained it. So that continues, right? And so the guys are still getting out and the teams are still maintaining some sort of focus, but it's difficult. It is really difficult to maintain that edge, all the time. It was difficult during, the entire time we were, I was in the GWAT, and you would see the times where you got complacent and teams would start to lose the edge and bad things would start to happen.
Really Describe to me what GWAT is.
Oh, the Global War on Terror. So
got it.
Starting from 9/11 till it continues today, right? So
yep.
We saw there's still terrorists out there influencing people to do bad things, and that requires a response. So that hasn't stopped just because the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's still
sure
radicals out there that want to do bad things to Americans.
Yep.
So for us, while we were like in Afghanistan, or the other teams were, they'd probably say the same thing about Iraq. And again, it's just trying to maintain that focus. That got challenging as well. That's why, we went on like 6-month rotations, because we saw any time past that, you started to lose some of the focus. Teams started to get complacent, and complacency when really dangerous things are happening is it's a recipe for disaster. So
yeah, that's interesting, because I imagine there's similar limits, right, on when you're actively deployed and you're in the conflict, right? The stamina piece of that, eventually you're going to run out of gas to some extent. Everybody's got different sort of horsepower, but it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I've even seen that just in places I've worked, where when you have a shared mission and everybody knows what the brass ring is, or you're under the gun and you've got a deadline, it's like people are more focused. It's when like the work isn't there as plentiful, or, things are relaxed. You're right. Like people get distracted easier. All of a sudden there's a little bit more gossip. There's just other stuff going on that you didn't have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. I also found it was harder for me personally when I was on a staff in Afghanistan, or like a commander, like when I was a battalion commander and I was basically stuck at the air base running all the operations for the teams that were out. I would have much rather have been back out with the teams doing the stuff on the ground than on the other end responsible for all the things that are making them successful. It was challenging, right? And it's exhausting for those staffs to be day in and day out. So, it's not lost on me when, again, we've been talking the parallels all day long, but you talk about sports or the like, that, that kind of back end leadership and, coaching in sports is very similar to that idea of those staff and, commanders who are not necessarily executing the operation. Yeah, when I think about like the most stress I had, it was then, because you didn't want to make any mistakes, right? You don't want to make the wrong call that's going to, cause a helicopter to be 15 minutes late, when they need to be out of there or something like that. So that kind of environment too is like a lot more taxing on me than making sure our guns were ready and getting on the bird and going out ourselves.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The tactical stuff I imagine is easier in some respect, because it's you're trained for it and you have to adapt. I'm not saying it's easy, but, and I don't know if you'd have perspective on this, because you were in, the majority of your career was spent in special forces, which, by definition is just going to be different than the general population. But I've had conversations with other folks who've talked about, sort of the declining standards, if you will, or the difficult, I shouldn't say declining standards, maybe the declining eligible population of folks that can join the military, that they're qualified. Right. And there's the, I guess, the physical piece of that, but we see it in sports, you see it in schools, you see it everywhere. Like there's just the generation now, it's different. They want to know why, and they're way more information at their fingertips. So they're, for better or for worse, sometimes more informed, and it's clearly different for the military. But have you noticed any evolution of that, in the latter half of your career?
No, I saw it, any of us that were, as a senior colonel. So, that rank right before general officer for the last, 5 years of my career. or longer than that, actually, a little bit more, 6. And you would start to see, not in terms of necessarily, I don't even think in the military, no, there was, the standards didn't change because we were trying to accommodate people that were less capable, right? Standards would change because like we got smarter about like understanding physical fitness. So we changed the physical fitness test to make it so that we had a better understanding of what actually gets you ready for combat by sit-ups, push-ups, and a 2-mile run. But there, it's not a secret that across the U.S. population, I mean, we're facing some like chronic health issues tied to how we eat, sleep, how we're spending our time, being sedentary, watching TV, playing video games, on social media, right? So all that stuff's impacting who's eligible for the service. The fact that we're not in a conflict right now makes it less enticing for people, actually. I think Americans are very service driven, and when they see a need to do something, they want to be a part of it, right? So right now, when it's like, well, what are they really doing? That makes it hard for the services to, get people excited about service in general, when it's like you'll be learning a skill and a trade that may or may not be used. My kids talked to me about that. They went to West Point thinking they were going to go right into like serving in Afghanistan or doing the things that they saw me doing their entire lives. I'm happy they're not doing that as a parent,
Right.
but they're a little bit, like, well, I thought there would be more to this than constant training. Especially my son, who's an infantry officer. Samantha's doing something different, right, for the Army. But she did her 2 years as a platoon leader and had the same kind of like enjoyed it, but again, thought that she would have enjoyed going to Afghanistan or Iraq better. As a parent, I'm glad she didn't, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, so you have all that stuff coming together. Now, I think as a whole, I was around long enough, 30 years prior to 9/11 and the buildup and kind of the height of like what our military was like, just firing on all cylinders, 2 different conflicts, other places all over the world at the same time, doing amazing things. But I also grew out of a force that was coming out of, the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of cuts. We saw, enlistments going down. There wasn't anything really going on in terms of conflicts. The Cold War was over. Why do we need a military anymore? And what we leaned into at that time was, even though we didn't have the resources, was we were going to be the best at what we were doing in terms of training at all times. And that's what was like my drumbeat this last few years before I got out, is like, we got to get back to that in terms of, you can give the people the purpose they need, maintain the standards, and continue to drive home like what we need to be ready for. And it's good that people are asking more questions. It's good that we have a group of, kids that are joining the Army that, have a lot more information at their fingertips and have a better understanding of what's going on maybe in the world than I did when I joined. So I think all of that stuff's good. The military has to adapt. I mean, special forces did. During the war, for purposes of growing the force, we started taking people straight off the street. You could enlist as a Green Beret.
I know that.
They call that 18 is like the military occupation skill like number for special forces. So they call them 18
Right.
X-rays, and then you get your designator once you get your job. Started out really small. We were going to keep it like, hey, because the in service, like recruiting and that experience that I talked about that makes the team the kind of the
right
understanding of what militaries do and armies do. We still need that. But what we found is you have a bunch of guys and now a few gals. There's, I think, been 8 women that have become Green Berets since they've opened it up to both genders. That you have that population of coming off the street has gone to the point where it's almost, I think it's at least half, if not more now, of who comes into the force. But it's folks that graduated from college or did a few years of college, very intelligent athletes that are, they're careers over in the college, but they want a team environment, so I mean, the quality of individual that we were seeing coming through the doors may not have had the wherewithal and understanding of like how the Army works, but you want to talk about a guy that could hit the ground running and like was just a sponge for information and physically just beasts. Like I would look at some of the new recruits and go, man, I would have never made it through their selection class. I'm not taking Sullivan. Look at these. There's 10 other guys twice his size, stronger and smarter, and none of them are officers. They're all enlisted guys. But So I think some of that is what the Army's going through and the other services in terms of how they adapt, how they open up the service to those other folks that are looking for something that maybe aren't straight out of high school.
Yeah.
But it's something we got to tackle, you know. I mean, I see it in terms of like our veteran population. The veteran population for the first time in American history is more unhealthy than its civilian counterparts. That's never been that way. It's been historically, veterans are the healthiest part of the U.S. population.
Sure.
And what we're seeing is a lot of veterans not taking care of themselves. That's why, you know, Team RWB is so important. But you're seeing it across the board in America, right? So, I mean,
yeah, it's a reflection of society in general, right?
Obesity's gone up. You know, you got the diabetes numbers are just through the roofs in the last, 2 decades. Mm-hmm. Some of it's tied to how we're eating. It's tied to all this other stuff. So, again, I just now see it as an opportunity for us to really work hard, not only with veterans, but for veterans to serve as an example again of what, right looks like. So maybe we can turn that corner again and maybe have some younger, healthier Americans that can, be ready to serve.
Yeah. I mean, your point about like, an entirely volunteer fighting force, is it's hard to really appreciate kind of what that means when you look around the rest of the world, right? And how they build their armies and how they do what they do. And to your point of adapting, right? You have to, I mean, you can say, get off my lawn and kids these days, but it's not gonna be real effective. And the thing that I bristled at it first, but I appreciate, how it made me better as a leader or as a person really is these kids, most of them, you can talk about millennials and sort of the stereotypes that are tagged to them, but wanting to know the why behind before they do something, it's going to make you have a good reason. It's going to make you answer that question where you might not even know yourself what the reason is. Yeah. Right. And it's like, you gotta, and sometimes you say it out loud for the first time and you're like, oh, that doesn't really make sense. Now that I've said it out loud, right? Or I never really thought about it that way. So it's like, it was eye-opening for me when people started asking those questions, but you're like, who the hell are you? Shut up. You're a freshman, and it's like, well, that's a good kid's got a good point.
You can't get away with it. It's always been done that way.
Yeah. Right. Right. So, one question I always want to ask folks, and given your background, I'm curious to hear your answer, but how do you define a good teammate?
Oh, that's a good one. I think it's the person that's willing to do all the hard work that you're willing to do with you, but also has the understanding to know that like they can't do it for you. Right. So like, so willing to help you, you got to go sweep the sheds, clean, something up, go to the motor pool, work on a truck. Everyone's going to go together. But if it's your task to complete, they can help you, they can show you, but don't do it for them. That's not a good teammate, right? So, I think a good teammate's going to be there for you to kind of mentor you, coach you, teach you, as well as be that person that's going to go through the event, whatever you're going through, with you, right? So, they got to play their role, and they can't play yours, but they know that if they don't do theirs 100%, more than likely you're not going to do yours either. So, I think a good teammate's setting the example, but also not, doing it for you. I mean, there's going to be times you have to step up. A good team will, team member will see like Sully's having a bad day. I'm going to have to pull a little bit more of his share, but there's no excuse for the bad day, right? A good teammate's not going to make your excuses for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the, I don't know if you remember the old SNL skit. My wife and I always joke about it. Nick Burns, the company computer guy, where somebody's just trying to, he's just like, move. And he shoves him out of the way and he just does it. Like, that's what you can just keep doing that, but you're going to be doing that for the rest of your life if you're fixing everybody else's problems.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, tell everybody again where they can find, Team RWB and, an incredible cause, well worth the support.
Yeah, you can Google Team Red, White, and Blue, or it's teamrwb.org. I think I said it wrong the first time, but you'll find us on the web there. And then again, we work we have chapters locally all over the United States. They're not everywhere though. So we supplement the community with the virtual aspect that is run through our application. And it's not just an event-based app. You can go in there and see what's going on in the calendar, but we have activity groups, just about, I think, anything you can think of, from cycling to rucking to walking to jogging, functional fitness, which is, a lot of people call it CrossFit, but, everything's in there. and some nutrition and some other things, because we try to provide that. You'll find all that in the app as well, and you can find the app in the app stores, both on Google and your iPhone. Just look for Team RWB. It'll be the first thing that comes up. You can't miss the eagle.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Sully, thank you again for your service, all that you have done, all that you continue to do with Team RWB. I for one, am very grateful for it and appreciate it. It's been awesome catching up with you, hearing a little bit more about your story. I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Yeah, anytime to talk about what I'm doing, I'm going to jump at it. I appreciate you taking the time, and it's been great, kind of building our friendship just based off a mutual acquaintance saying, "Hey, if you're thinking about going into team sports or anything like that, give Billy or Ryan a call." That's the guy I would call first. So
yeah,
I appreciate the fact that after that first phone call, you continue to take my calls.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I feel the same way. Sort of the shared values are clear, and I appreciate different paths we've been on, but it's kind of fun to idea share. So I appreciate you doing that today.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Sully.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe to be notified of future episodes. If you'd like to support the show, please take a second, leave a rating and review, or share it with your friends. If you're interested in similar content, you can check out my website at nooneiswatching.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter, read my blog, or follow me on your social media platform of choice. Look, your time is valuable, so thank you for lending me something.